Hey guys, welcome. My name's Peyton Jones, and you don't need to know a lot about me. I don't really know what to say, but you're not here for me. You're here for Brian. Brian is the founder of Tampa Underground, and he has written multiple books. He's written a book called Underground, published by Zondervan. He's written Micro Church. He wrote another one with Zondervan, and it's slipping. This is happening, Brian, to me as I get older. I should know this because I was on their team. I'm regularly trafficked in your book. Oh, you went. You should be right back. I don't know what's happening. This is the hazard with live technology. Now you're stuck with ugly face, and I'm sorry about that. So Brian should be back on any minute. So I know there he is. Hey.
Sorry about that.
That was all right. That was a great trick, man. I like that. That was like a hat trick.
Now you see me, now you don't.
That's right. So, hey, man, it's really good to see you. I may tell our story about our fateful meeting that first time. I might actually let that story out into the public. I don't know if people can handle it. It makes me look really bad, but it's funny enough to tell. But hey, brother, it's really good to see you. You and I don't think we've talked since you've been back from Ireland.
No, we haven't, but I am back, fully Americanized, back into the crazy time over here.
Yeah. Hey, and I think we geeked out on our almost matching tattoos, right?
Oh, that's right.
The last time we interviewed, I was like, dude, so mine is not as cool as yours. Mine is Ninja Clan from G.I. Joe from the 80s, so Yo Joe. I think yours is something more legit and like distinguished.
No, see, that's just it. Your thing is cool. Mine's more sentimental. Yours is cool.
Yours is probably like about yours is probably more like about your kids and like things that actually matter. Mine's like, yeah, put G.I. Joe on there. I'm good with that. So, hey, Brian and I, we do actually like each other. I like Brian. He pretends to like me. So I think that's all right. But Brian, hey, before we go on, I do actually just want to hear about Ireland, and anyone who kind of tracks with you. I think they'd want to hear, a little bit about what your Ireland experience was like, what God taught you, what you did, was it more restful? Was it more work? Just give us an update.
I mean, it's interesting. I'm doing a study of the book of Mark right now with a bunch of people. And, there's this cycle in Mark of conflict. Like he has some kind of engagement with his opponents, withdrawal, which is just this interesting feature of Jesus's missionary life, like this cycle of conflict, withdrawal, and then consolidation, like getting the disciples together and telling them something he didn't tell everyone else, or naming them, or calling them to himself, or a regrouping kind of thing, and then back out into the world of mission, and then a confrontation with opponents, and then withdrawal. And actually the word in Greek, it has this meaning of like retreat from peril, So, it can feel like withdrawing from our primary missionary context can just seem like, I don't know, chickening out or something like that. And it certainly didn't feel that way to me, but I am sort of reinterpreting my time in Europe as a kind of withdrawal and consolidation of some of my own heart, just back to my missionary roots, just starting things. I wasn't in charge really of anything as the primary leader. And the kind of the liberation of that for a couple of years was extraordinary. And then to just be able to be that outsider, that person that maybe sees things a little differently and can ask questions and is curious. And that can be really actually a potent quality or gift to a people as we come in, as long as there's like lots of honor and listening, and there's no colonial intention, like I'm here to reshape you in my own image or something like that. And then of course, Irish people in particular are just very competent, deeply rooted people. They're the disciples that we worked with are just remarkable, but humble. I think we talked about this too, like they don't see themselves as, I couldn't start something, or I shouldn't be the person at the lead of something. So a little bit of American kind of can-do spirit is a drop of that into that Irish maturity was actually a really cool blend, a really cool mix. So we ended up starting a bunch of things, helping to start a bunch of things, which are now Irish led, and it was a joy. It really was.
That's rad, man. I love that. And for those of you that don't know Brian, I mean, your story's huge. I don't know if you even would want to tell that or not. When we dip into microchurch and what microchurch is, I might let you save that. But for those of you that don't know, Brian was in Tampa, started a movement called the Underground, and then went to Ireland. And I kind of got the impression it was like you were going to help them start their thing, whatever that was going to look like. Now, what I love about you and Jeremy, the guy that you work with, you guys aren't into cloning for other people, like, oh yeah, Underground, come do what we did. It's more about helping people find out, like, what does God want you to do? And often we want to avoid the pain. I remember talking with Jeremy a few years ago, and I was like, hey man, if I do something like with you guys, I don't want to do it like that pain of like finding stuff out that's hard, a part that sucks, which is normal in church planning. That's the part I like. He's like, wow, man, that's rad. Like people don't normally say that. But for me, like even as a serial church planner, when you mentioned about having that time to rest, I've been in ministry for decades now. I'm getting old, Brian. But I think that's the secret is I regularly in between church plans just pull away and have nothing to do with ministry for a time. And I love it. I know that sounds weird, but I think everybody has a love-hate relationship at times with ministry itself. I think if you're doing it right, you do. But
what's interesting too, Peyton, about when Jesus withdraws, like in his story, he still gets kind of inundated with the demon possessed and with the sick, and he still does that. But it's this sort of different kind of ministry. They're not his opponent. They're there to just receive the kingdom, and even that can be a kind of sabbatical from ministry, is to actually just go do some mission. To actually just be with non-believers, and the sick and the needy and the poor and the hungry.
Right.
You know what I mean? That can be restorative as well, because it's not some of that grind of ministry, which we need to get back into sometimes. But like you're saying, it's a retreat.
Yeah, that's good, man. So I was going to ask you, because when you went to Ireland, and we will get, for those of you hanging out with us, we will get into microchurch. We will dip into that. And you can pop your questions in the chat as Brian's talking, and I'll start firing those at him like Nerf bullets. But as you went away, and like, it's weird, isn't it, to be away from, kind of your homeland when crisis hits, right? You're overseas. Remember 9/11 hit, and I was a missionary in Wales, and all kinds of different stuff hitting the economic crash. I'm overseas. I'm watching it from afar. But what did God, or what did you feel about everything you've been doing, the micro churches, kind of training others? How did it impact, your sense of what you had been doing to be over there during COVID? I guess what I'm asking is, did it reinforce, like, yeah, we were on the right track and America surely needed this? Or did it take you in a different direction? Was that time, did you feel like you gained a bunch of new insight or new direction? Or did you feel it simply reinforced what you're doing?
It's a good question, because, with COVID happening while I was there, suddenly everybody was interested in small decentralized version of the church, because it was forced upon them, especially in the very beginning, in the first few months of COVID, it was kind of like, what do we do? Before there was a digital alternative, before the first kind of like, and unfortunately, I would say, unfortunately, I think some people have really latched on to a digital solution.
Yep.
As maybe, okay, this is the pivot from that we've learned from COVID. And I would just think, oh, it's disappointing, because
right,
in a sense, it's doubling down on the weaknesses of the system we currently had.
Correct. Yeah.
And actually there's this other opportunity, which of course many people, probably people on this call, have more sense God's leading towards. How do we decentralize without losing the sense of us and the bigness of the church? How do we become small and hold on to the bigness of the church, hold on to that sense of like we're a part of something significant in our city,
Right.
in our region. And so that I'd say that recipe, that sort of cocktail of centralized and decentralized and how that works together. Of course, that's the work we've done for the last 13, 14 years, to try to solve that puzzle. How do you do that? How do you really create an empowered, autonomous network of small missional communities, micro churches, whatever, expressions of the church which are essentially missional, while at the same time maintaining some sense of us, some sense of like the macro church that serves that holds it together, that expects something from it, that creates both accountability and also a platform of services so that they can flourish and not fail. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there to crush us, so we kind of need that. We need that infrastructure to support us. So it was interesting. And then to be in Ireland and to be like, okay, people now suddenly knocking on our door saying like, how do you do this? How do you do this? And like to your point earlier, to be a step away to say, well, I can't really help you that much. I can give you some thoughts, but you've got to figure this out on your own. And honestly, isn't that the point? Isn't that the journey here? That God wants us to return to him. Whatever the crisis, whatever the change, whatever the sort of threat to the system, in the end, it's a yearning for God to say, hey, come to me, come get the answers from me, So it's, in a sense, it was good that we were sort of dislocated, that I at least was dislocated. I thought that was kind of poetic, maybe.
Yeah. It was amazing timing. So real quick, before we jump into microchurch, I got to ask you, because normally when I have a guest, I ask them completely ridiculous question.
Yes,
so thanks for sharing that. Yes, it's just kind of the way it goes. Okay, so this is a twofer. Number one, what's the weirdest thing that you get advertised on your social media? Like, is it David Bowie socks? Is it, what's the weirdest ads that pop up for you?
Gosh, I it's not weird, but I just started looking at this like Remarkable thing that it's like a paper tablet thing. And I guess Google just knows that you want it. So it's just relentless. Like I see an ad for that and it's wore me down, man. It just keeps wearing me down.
Have you bought it yet?
It works. So anyways, I don't want to waste time on it, but basically I kept complaining to my assistant, like, oh, it'd be great to have one of those. It sucks. So she took like a collection with all my friends to buy me one recently. So, but that was all down to the algorithm.
That was kind of my second question. That was a twofer answer, because my second question was, what's the coolest thing that you get advertised? So for me, I got advertised like a baby Grogu, baby Yoda. And the most weirdest thing, I have these karate pajamas they keep showing me. And it's this dude running around in this, like, it looks like he's wearing a gi, but it's like the most, and they do it with like this mood music. So it's like the most innovative pajamas ever to hit men. And it's this guy jamming around in like these karate pajamas. And I'm like, okay.
And you kind of want them though, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing.
But my kids are already, I have these pants called my ninja pants. They're like Asian streetwear. And like, they have like Chinese writing when I call them my ninja pants and if I drop my daughter off at any kind of game practice, I can't get out of the car if I got ninja pants on. No, Dad, no. So anyways, but hey, micro churches, that's what we want to talk about. I want to thank you for just coming on, Brian. I always appreciate picking your brain. Really love hearing what you have to say. And your story's pretty cool, but people, it's like any buzzword, right? People are going to talk about micro church and they might have, the same glossary, but a different dictionary, to quote Walter Martin. They may mean different things. What is a micro church?
Well, I mean, for us, I would say it's the simplest, irreducible minimum of the church. In other words, so maybe that definition is in the to the beholder. What is that for you might be slightly different from me, but I would strongly want to argue that a microchurch is that ecclesial minimum. It is whatever our answer to the question of, if you were to reduce the church down to just these elements, and you'd have to say it is a church, it is still a church. What would you be left with? Now, maybe that's like, for us, that would be three things: that sort of worship, community, and mission, those up and out, those three dynamics. When those three things are in place in a community, the lordship of Jesus, deep fellowship and communion with each other as believers, and somehow a work, an effort in obedience to expand the boundaries of the kingdom and mission, I think that's the church. I think what you're looking at is the church. Now, it can have other things, right? It can have a building or a pastor or money or sacraments or leadership or ordination. It can have lots of things, really. But if those three things are there, I'd have to admit that I'm looking at a church. And so maybe for you it's 4, maybe somebody else it might be 5 or 9 or whatever. But whatever that minimum is, I would say that's a micro church. And so in other words, it's our sort of core product, if you will. It's the thing that we can reproduce. So when we start talking about church planting, which I know is important to you, it's important to me. I'm in those conversations sometimes about church planting. It goes back to the kind of glossary and dictionary thing. Like, okay, I'm all for church planting, but what are we talking about? Like, what are we planting? And I think if we'll allow ourselves that simpler definition, that doesn't exclude a more complex version of the church. But if we'll allow ourselves a simpler definition and say, actually, when that thing is happening, there is like this, the goods, the sacramental life of the kingdom is being delivered to the world in and through that thing. Then we say, well, man, we could have a lot more of those.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we could actually, they would be easier to fund, and they could go into lots of little gaps and cracks and crevices in our city.
Oh, you're speaking my love language now. That's right? To me, that is church planning. So ironically, with my next book on church planning, I spend the first chapter saying, Paul, look at him. He never talks about it. When he talks about his ministry, he never says, I'm out to plant a church. He's the best church planner. He was there to do these other things that he lists out. And as he did that, churches happen. And so I'm with you, man. If you focused on the things that you focus on with a micro church, I think you would agree. If you just did those things, you would end up church planning on accident. And
well, yeah, and that's interesting too, isn't it? Like, what is it we're really doing? So, I've made this argument. I think you would agree, if not with the language or the sentiment, that we're not actually supposed to be planting churches. We're not actually called to plant churches. We're called to do mission, and to start mission and to plant mission. Yeah. And out of the soil of a fruitful mission, churches are born. That's a byproduct. Totally. The church is a byproduct, right? I mean, there is no clear biblical mandate to go make churches or plant churches. The biblical mandate, and by the way, your book is very good. Is it out yet? It's not out.
It comes out April 20th.
Yeah. So
thanks, man.
Obviously,
thanks for
I had the
looking.
privilege of reading it, and it's incredibly deep dive into the biblical text of it. So you're basically, I mean, part of what I think you're uncovering is this idea of like
you're in there a bit.
If Paul is a church planter, he's not rushing off to plant churches. That's not in his mind. That is not his framework, right? His framework is, well, it's that tripartite mission that Jesus gives in Luke 10, and it's like heal the sick, cast out demons, proclaim the kingdom.
That's it.
And then guess what? People come to faith. A community is born. Hands are laid on some people. A treasuring of the word of God happens in that place, and then suddenly you have to call that thing something, right? The assembly of the people. So fine, that's a church. But mission is the thing we do first.
So I love this because I really think, man, if people just grabbed hold of those few things that you're talking about, because to me, like down the road when I was church planning and when I was getting into cereal planting and planting out, at a certain point, I realized the key to all this is empowering others in their gifts. That's why when I read Underground, I was like, like this is gold. This is what it all comes down to ultimately, right? Acts 2, they're discipling those believers. They go up and accidentally plant Antioch, right? They weren't trying to plant a church. They just well-discipled believers, empowered in their gifts, went up and did mission, like you said, and churches happen. So looking at microchurch, I know empowering others from your book Underground. I mean, if I look back on that book and I think one scene that really that my mind always goes to when I think of that book, it's that seat in the diner, that booth. It's like your mobilization station, a Grand Central, right? The key to your operation. Tell me a little bit about that booth. Tell us what happened there. Tell people that are joining us, how did micro churches come out of that little booth?
Well, of course, I mean, the intention of the Underground was to be a to be a form of the church that was essentially a service platform for called people, so you really couldn't be part of the Underground if you didn't have a calling, and if you weren't going to try to start a micro church or be part of a micro church. So you had to know that. So once we kind of hung that shingle and said, we are here to empower your idea. And of course that worked like gangbusters, because sadly at the time, this is 14 years ago, churches weren't doing that. You'd come to the pastor's office and you'd sit across the big desk and you'd say, I think I just have this idea that I want to go reach at-risk kids in the neighborhood, or I want to start something in my home, or I want to do something for families with kids with disabilities, and the pastor would say, well, at worst, the pastor would say, sorry, we can't help you. And that's not the vision of this church, so get back aligned with our vision, if you will. At best, they would say, well, that's lovely. Good luck,
Right.
But that's it. They're not going to get any help. So for us to just say, and of course, that's really changed, Peyton. I mean, to sort of, celebrate the change in the church in the last decade like that. I think that's changed. I think it's less likely that person's going to get shooed out and told no, which
right.
I thought was actually really a scandal.
Right.
Told, like, I feel called by God to do something, and you're telling me don't do it. Like, I'm not supposed to do it. And also, all I was doing in those early years was just sort of receiving people. In the closest place to our office, there's this little diner thing in this one booth I always sat in, the same waitress, and I just had meeting after meeting after meeting, probably hundreds of meetings in that booth where people would share their idea. I feel like God's leading me to do this with this group of people. So creative, so interesting, so different. Sometimes, harebrained.
Right.
And just having the privilege of saying, yes, you have permission to do that.
Or yeah.
They're looking to me as some sort
Which
of.
I hear in the background. Yeah.
That's my grandson. He can't say grandfather, which is what I want him to say, so he says Gaia. That's all. That's what you're hearing.
Oh, okay. All right. That's rad.
But just that idea of permission, which of course is key. The absence of permission is really a problem, and then when permission is present, people are looking for some kind of authority, spiritual authority, to say, yes, you absolutely can do this. In fact, to be able to say to people, man, if you don't do this, that's bad. Like if you really sense God stirring your heart to do this, you need to move heaven and earth to chase that population, that area of concern. Because I promise you, your heart is selfish. And so where you feel that draw, that compassion, that compulsion of compassion, that's almost always God.
Right.
Right. There could be other weird motives around it, but trust it, go with it. And so just the chance to say yes to people.
Right.
And then the cool thing is having a structure behind you to say, and now all that we have is yours. All of these services. I mean, overnight now you've got a media department, and you have an accounting department, and you have an office to work out of, and you have a community of leaders that aren't doing the same thing you're doing, but they get it. They get what it's like to start something and to try to step into this blue ocean of missionary space that no one else is working in or whatever. So yeah, those were good times. That restaurant's closed now, and it's kind of breaks my heart because I walked by it and there's no more booth.
I think you guys need to buy it. That's all I'm saying. Just buy it, and you have that kind of enshrined. One day we'll have the Underground Museum, and it'll be like plated in gold, Be a statue of you sitting there.
Yeah, right.
So, hey, and that's rad, because I love that you brought the other resources, because one of the things that, there's a difference, right? Certain people would come to you, they'd hear your story, and they would go, and there's more to this story. Like, by all means, you guys need to get Underground. If you've not grabbed that book, it's by Zondervan. It is a fun read, but it's all of this stuff that Brian's talking about. But also, everything from, you guys had this amazing facility. I remember watching the video where it's walking through with like this panoramic view, and you're like, hey, these are office spaces for people to meet in. Here's this, here's that, a film room, a this room, a that, people need to counsel. They're in here. Hey, here's a recording studio, because one of our micro churches records worship performed by homeless people, or just produces albums for them because they have these gifts and they feel glorified. Beautiful stuff. And I remember watching that going, holy crap, that thing is amazing. And sometimes you find like innovative spaces, like Wesley in Bristol, right? He had his, it's called the New Rooms. And on the bottom level, it was 3 levels. The bottom level is horse stables for circuit riders. The second story was the giant chapel. And the third story was all the rooms in a ring. It was an oval shaped building. It's still there. You can go see it. And then there was a central meeting, and he would disciple and mentor the circuit riders, and they would deploy. And then there was also a church there. And so you think of that, like that was a ministry powerhouse of a space. And I know that some of our watchers, they're tuning in and they go, well, I know that I probably won't fundraise, because a part of your journey and your gifting is you were able to fundraise to get this kind of almost like a hangar for everybody else's airplane, to sit and take off from, kind of like Wesley Zeal. But some people will come in and say, I just want to do this kind of mission. And others, and I know there's the third category of people that are coming all broken and busted up. And they're like, Brian, I could have been somebody, Johnny. COVID ran me over and backed up on me again 3 times. And now I think the micro church is the answer for me to get back to whatever it is. So you've got those 3 different types of, some people are going to hear your story and go, yeah, I need to talk to Brian about, architecting something. And then other people will be like, okay, I just want something small, nondescript. And then there's that other person. It's like, is this the new way for me to do ministry, but in a different way? So I don't know if you could speak to all 3 of those a little bit. I know that's a loaded question, right?
Well, I like the word architect. I think there is a kind of architecture. So for those of us maybe on the call that have, existing communities, there certainly is an architecture. And if you have a building, obviously there's a floor plan. There was a designer's intent for that building. It is interesting though that the idea of the theology of a built environment and what it says about us, what it reveals about the intention of the architecture that goes into it. But it's important to also recognize that the infrastructure we've created, the way we do salaries, the way who we hire, positions, job descriptions, legacy budgets, all of those things also are architecture. They represent, there is a theology behind that architecture too. And so to understand kind of change management, or, if we do have a hard to see something new or fresh or innovative, emerge from those systems, we're going to have to deal with the architecture. So even thinking about something like a floor plan is a fascinating exercise. Almost like, okay, you got this much square footage. Maybe these are where the load-bearing walls are, but then just erase every other wall. How would you rebuild that church to represent a new set of values, for example? I think it can be a great exercise. It's something I would want to do if I went and did a consult with an existing church that wanted to make this kind of change toward micro churches. That's one of the 8 systems I would look at, which is their actual facilities and their resources, right. How they're used and how it could be redesigned. So gutted. So for example, for me, if the largest room used to be a sanctuary, which essentially has that sort of bias toward a Sunday morning gathering, that's what the church really is, a Sunday morning gathering, a spectacle, a thing that you watch, which of course inadvertently has created that bystander effect by the way, that term was coined by two social scientists that wrote an article in the New York Times in 1964 after remarking on the murder of a woman named Kitty Genovese, who was brutally stabbed to death in view of some 30 witnesses, and none of which did anything. And so, kind of musing on that, what is it about us that makes us watch something like that happen and not intervene, not engage? And they came up with this idea of what they call the diffusion of responsibility. In other words, the more people we have watching something, the less we feel responsible to do anything about it. And of course, the converse is true too. If there's only one person bearing witness to something horrendous, we feel a tremendous responsibility to do something, because we know if I don't do something about this, no one will. And so the more people we have watching something, watching a spectacle, the less we feel connected to it. It's, again, in psychology, we would call that learned helplessness, that actually we've set a social contract where people come and we say, what does it mean to be a member of this church? It means to come on a Sunday, sit in this seat, watch something, and actually don't do much more than that. It's kind of important that you stand up when you're asked to, you sit down, you're asked to, you come in quietly, you leave in an orderly way, you give a little bit of money, but sort of that's what it meant. And so that learned helplessness has made us missionally weak. And so then all of us are frustrated because we turn and say, why won't my people volunteer? Why won't my people go out and do mission? Why I'm preaching from the stage to do this and they're not doing it? And we don't realize that sort of architecture of the social contract that we've created with them is you're just meant to watch. That's what you were meant to do. And then they continually feel less and less responsible for that. So if I look at a sanctuary and I say, okay, that's from that system, a church as spectacle, the first thing I would do is turn that biggest space into co-working, because I would say, okay, I want everybody that has a missional idea, have a place to kind of buzz around, create an ecosystem where they can interact with each other, and then take the fellowship hall, or I don't know, whatever the second largest room is or whatever, and make that a little chapel or something. And we still have and multi-purpose. So we could have lots of we could have banquets in there. We could do worship. We could have gatherings, whatever. Maybe put a tent outside. I don't know. But the point is, even just rethinking something like that architecture. But then you're right. There's going to be some people on the call who don't have a building, don't have any kind of that architecture to deal with or to re-engineer. And they're just thinking, man, how do I start something from scratch? Or is this something I can do again? But the truth is, it's not so simple as that. And just saying, I'm going to start a couple of micro churches, that is probably where we begin. But also to have the sophistication to realize that, you would hope that one or two micro churches could become a dozen micro churches or 24 micro churches. And then it still asks the question of architecture. It still asks the question, okay, then what? Then what will you do? What would the terms of our relationship with each other be? What expectations would we have on each other? How would we be there for each other in times of trouble or sin? What would we expect from each other, and what would we give? So if we think about the next kind of iteration of the church, and when I say next, I mean the next 20 years or something, as network, and I think that's a fair bet to make, that the church is going to reorganize itself into networks. Then you have to think, okay, what are the terms of a network? Networks are built on mutuality. Like nodes of a network there's not hierarchy, right? So you come in or out of a network because there's something I'm getting and there's something that I'm giving, right? And then service, like, am I somehow, it's in my interest. It's good for what I'm trying to do to be a part of this network. It gives me something I was missing before. So we started thinking about it that way. Then I think we can begin to understand what it will take to sort of recreate or restructure the church for the coming years, because it won't just be like, this is the church's vision and I'm such a good communicator and I'm such a charismatic person that that gravitas is going to bring everyone into something. Those days are gone. I mean, they're still around for some people. There's always going to be a kind of lingering thing, but the days of that being a preeminent lever for leadership, I think those days are gone.
I agree, and I think the generation coming up just doesn't doesn't see that as being ministry anyways. I think they see that as being very self-serving to an individual with ego needs. I mean, this generation, this social media, I mean, they grew up with social media. I'm talking to you. I know you like polish off like 300 books a year, 400, whatever it's up to now. But so I know you have probably read and understand this way better than I do. But I, I think about it that this generation has just seen social media all the time. They're very aware of what it means to be an influencer or presenter or a master of content, and I think they're just not as turned on. They're more intrigued and interested in sharing that with others. And so, exactly what you're saying, I do think this micro church idea or way of structuring is more akin to not only the New Testament, but where this generation is going. I think we're seeing an aligning of one generation with a previous generation and what they're geared for and wired for. But I was going to ask you, so how did you guys, I don't mean this to be prescriptive. I mean it to be descriptive in the sense of how did you guys navigate? Like where did the underground kind of land on, how you dealt with finances, how you dealt with, like you said, was everybody who led a micro church, were they some type of, did they have representation as if like an eldership or a deaconship or whatever? How did that work for you?
Well, I came from kind of the parachurch world, so I was not intimidated by raising money, and I think that helped a lot. I think those of us that have come out of the sort of church proper, traditional church, can be very intimidated by the idea of raising money. But I would say actually the first thing you have to liberate is your mind. But the second thing actually that you need to liberate is your money. Before you rush off to do something about a model, which I think is a temptation. We got this idea, so let's go try to do it. But it's in medicine, it's what's called graft versus host disease. Where you try to put an organ from a different body into this body, and if it's not just right, the receiving body will reject the organ. It will attack it as a immune system attacks a foreign entity, a contaminant, because that's essentially what it is. So, if we don't deal with our economic model, with our financial model, and actually liberate ourselves from it, these kind of changes are it's foolhardy actually to try to drop some of these ideas into an existing system which is built on getting money a certain way. So you become dependent on that. Obviously, if you pass the plate on Sunday mornings, you say, well, do we really need Sunday mornings? Yeah, we really need Sunday mornings, because how else are we going to get money? So you're locked. You're totally locked in. That preeminence, that importance is built into the economic system. So, for us, it was just going to people, and I would actually say most of us, if we have existing churches with existing budgets, most of us, it's probably about 20% of our people that give almost all the money. And you can just look at that. Stop trying to pretend like you don't know who they are. You know them. So you could just sit down with them, actually one-on-one, or you could sit down with them in a group and just say, listen, can we just take some chances here? Can we just take some risks? Can we go in a new direction? Will you guys stick with us? If I'm over here scared that you're going to stop giving if I stop doing X, Y, or Z, then I can't really lead. I can't be free to do what we sense God's Spirit leading us to do in this next generation. Are you with me? Like, let's do this together and disciple them and work with them. And if you can get those few people, I mean, in some cases, it's like eight people or something, six people that basically pay for everything. So if that's the case, then just get them on board, treat them with respect, because they're your benefactors, and actually say, can we do this together as a team? And then once you have that freedom, you can do anything. You can make whatever changes at least economically. You're going to have to deal with the impact of that. And so we had that from day one. We just had total buy-in from donors, people that were just like, do whatever, make it different. In fact, the more different, the better. They wanted to see something that didn't quite look like the old wine skin. So that was important. And then in terms of like leadership structure, yeah, we wanted our microchurches. So we would see sort of a dual operating system. And on one side, you have the microchurches as being an organic network, totally autonomous. They're in charge of their microchurches. We're not. You create a college of elders. So every church is led by an elder or elders. Yes, we would be an ordaining entity in a sense, to train them to what it means to be an elder, do a ceremony, have some kind of a celebration of saying, look, you, this is who you are. We're acknowledging that. That's what ordination is. and then creating a college of elders, a community of elders in which they covenant with each other to certain behaviors, certain theological commitments. But that's kind of free. It's not under a hierarchy. It's covenantal, right? And then on the other side of this dual operating system is a hierarchy. It's a nonprofit organization in a sense that exists to serve these churches. So I would call them churches, right? Because they are. And then what are we over here then? What am I? I'm not the pastor of the church. I don't lead those churches. That's ridiculous. How could I possibly be leading 200, 300 things? It's ridiculous. So I exist to serve that. We create a little organization. Maybe we've got a dozen staff. I think at our height, we've maybe had 40 staff. Those people existed to serve these people. They wake up every morning thinking, what do we have to do to help these people flourish, to help these churches that are within our network flourish and not fail and not suffer. And so that's it. And then you create services and so on to try to answer that question, basically.
So stupid question, but like your college of elders, because this is the first time I've heard you mention that, probably because I've never asked you. I mean, you and I have talked a few times, but that's really intriguing. How do you guys, sorry, I've got the barbarian hordes here. Kids are out of school. They've descended. They're trying to be so good and sneak behind me. But the thing is that when you get them, like, how do you pour into them? How do you think? Is it kind of like, I got these people over here, they're going to be different. They're going to need different things. Or is it kind of like, hey, here's how we travel together, because you have 200, 300 micro churches. And does that mean you had a college of elders, about 200, 300, even more if they had multiple people on their team?
Right. Exactly.
That's legit.
Yeah. So you don't, so we want to have an elder team. It's just an interesting idea, that it's a sort of a biblical idea, which we have a cultural appropriation of, right? So there's a biblical idea that these churches should be led by elders. But then we've sort of created our own version of that, which is like there's 6 to 10 or 12 of these people that run a church, right? Whether that church is 50 people or that church is 50,000 people, we still think, how ridiculous is that? You've got a group of 10 people that are going to lead a church of 10,000. How is that possible? How are they shepherds or elders over that many people? It's not possible. So there's got to be more elders in a church of 5,000 than 10. The way that the Bible describes what an elder is, right? The word presbytos just means like older one, the slightly more mature. So I think in every community, in every little context, there's somebody that's sort of looked to. There's somebody that's more mature, that knows the word better, that's respected. That just God's Spirit falls on a certain way, and so in that sense, we don't create elders. We don't run them through our course and make them an elder. They are already an elder. What we do is we acknowledge that. We recognize that. We name it. That's what ordination means, to put in order, to put in its proper place. So we just and then who is the we that recognizes that? It's the rest of them. It's the community of elders. So they all sort of look at it. It's like that. We, in our little ceremony, it's almost like at a wedding where you say, does anybody know why this man and this woman should not be joined together in holy matrimony? Where we have the same question, like, is there any reason why this person should not be, considered an elder? We ask that question ahead of time.
It's funny because my mind's going back to Wesley again, right? Like, I'm fascinated by Wesley. I'm hearing so many things that are echoes. They would have like this meeting once a year, and it was all the leaders of the societies, which were like micro churches. They really were just they were outside of the Anglican church, but they were these little powerhouse discipleship groups, really. And they called them the experience meeting, or, whatever it was, but societies. And then they had these bands where there was like, they tried to organize it, but they'd come together and they'd fight about stuff. And no, I think this, and no, I think that. And then, there was there was something they were trying to figure it out,
Yep.
and
Yep.
there's no hard, fast rules to it, I guess. Hey, I got to ask you this question. We have a question coming in from DJ Putoff, which I want to ask you. But I got a question for you. So when you went to fundraising, because I know you a little bit, and I've been in settings. I remember being in a setting with you once, and it was in Long Beach. I don't know if you remember that meeting. We're in Long Beach, and it was during a break. And this is where I felt like I started to get to know you a bit. You have a prophetic side to you, and you just came in and you go, what are we doing here? Like, what are we really? I mean, and you weren't being judgmental. You're just like, I just don't know what we're doing here. Like, you were trying to connect with what is God doing here? And are we aware of that? Or are we just doing our thing? Which to me is always like, that's what the prophet asks, right? And I'm not saying you're prophetic. You definitely have a prophetic side. You might, I'm guessing you're more apostolic on the APES, but maybe as a Swiss Army knife, that's one of your bigger tools there on that knife, on that multi-tool. But what I kind of, as I'm looking at you as a fundraiser, I can't picture you coming in as a fundraiser with that prophetic side and being like, all right, here's my PowerPoint and here's my thing, and read this. And I don't see you as like a guy that's going to be formulaic in that, like you read Funding Your Ministry by the dude, and I got this figured out now, I'm do this and write this letter. And what does that look like for you when you're funding a vision? Because it's a huge vision. I mean, there has to be a skill set and a gifting in that. But I just, part of me is kind of digging down into, what does that look like for you? What does fundraising look like? What would a conversation go into someone saying, hey, I got this radical vision? Can we talk about it?
It's interesting because over the years, I've become really good friends with some VCs and venture capitalists, and in the role that I'm in now with the National Christian Foundation, I'm spending a lot of time with people of high capacity. So it's like peeking behind the curtain a little bit after all these years and just being on the ministry side, trying to hope for some money or believe in the thing we're doing or whatever. And the truth is, if you ask a VC, like, what are you looking for in a business idea? If you're going to put $1 million of capital into something, what are you looking for? And I think most of them would say, so we think it's a business plan, right? We think, this is the idea that's going to change the world. And the VCs I know would say, the business plan is like 5% of whether they would go for it. So we put all this thought into like creating this foolproof, ironclad business plan. But what VCs know, which startup guys sometimes don't know yet, is that the plan never works. Ever. Like 99% of the time, the thing that you put on the table, the business isn't going to look anything like that. So the question that they're really asking, I mean, the idea is important. The starting point's important. But the question they're really asking is, who is this person sitting across from me? And can I invest in them? In other words, when that change comes, when the business plan gets shredded in the 6th month, will they know what to do? Will they figure it out? And I think the relationships I've had, in a sense, with kind of angel investors, looking at some people with some capacity to say, we're with you, we're behind you, we're going to invest in you. I also like the image of like a benefactor. I love the story of Van Gogh, who was supported by his brother for most of his life as his art dealer, and basically a benefactor. He paid his way because he believed in his art. And of course, Van Gogh sells one painting before he dies in his lifetime. But that guy was proved right, to have invested, to be a benefactor. So in a sense, if we think of ourselves as artists, and maybe that's more of what ministry is becoming, Peyton, isn't it? It's less of a science and it's more of an art form. And so if you believe in the artist, then you say, I'm going to back this guy because I know his work is going to come good, or her work is going to come good. And the truth is, to me, that's the heart of fundraising. It's just getting in front of people with means who are looking for good places to put money, and to say, I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to learn. I'm not so sure. I'm not 100% sure of this one idea or this one vision, but I promise you, we will go for this outcome, or we will. And I think for me, for the sort of handful of givers, donors that have supported us over the years, that's what it was. And it's a relationship. That's the other thing, is we want to think of donors, they just give us their money and then go away. And that's not healthy. It needs to be the opposite. Now, we don't even be under their thumb. But at the same time, there should be a real relationship there, a real sort of the philanthropic community, and then the implementers, the people that are meant to go do it. We're meant to trust each other. Maybe God has given them wealth for a reason. I don't know. Maybe entrusted them with it to distribute it, and they're good at that. Trust that they're good at that. But at the same time, don't be afraid to ask. I mean, honestly, they're looking for good ideas, so put yours out there. And if it isn't that good, then maybe you shouldn't do it. Like, if nobody wants to fund it, maybe your idea is not as good as you think it is, or maybe you're not ready, and trust them. I've always liked that kind of, like, I'll throw it out there to my angel investor type friends, this idea I have. And if nobody bites on it, maybe it's not time, or maybe it's not, maybe that's God sort of speaking through them,
I like that. I like that a lot, man. I think that's pretty legit. That, I read this book called Gospel Patrons. I'm sure you've probably come across this, where talked about every move of God in church history, really. That was a major thing. There was a benefactor somewhere. Wow. There was a gospel patron.
Yep.
So with Tyndale, there was Geoffrey of Monmouth, who funded that thing. When there was, the Countess Huntington, this lady that funded Whitfield, and then went on to fund all these church plants as well. Yeah. But it just goes through church history. I mean, phenomenal, seeing that. So I love that you're, and I think that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing for me, because I've always planted churches on the free. So one of these days I might come knocking on your door and ask for some coaching. Brian, teach me, sensei. I promise I won't wear the ninja pants, when it's happening. But so let me get to this question here. DJ says, any insights on handling a micro church that is multiplied into gospel and church planning, matured into its own 501c3, and then become fully autonomous, but entropy sets in with the second generation of leadership that maintains the original community service, but gradually declines in gospel intentionality and loses its ecclesiastical minimum? Now, that's a mouthful. So basically it goes, hey, there's a micro church, it was doing awesome, and it goes south. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it happens. It does happen.
Yes. All right. Next question.
No, well, I mean,
just joking.
Well, yeah, I mean, to one degree, maybe that is enough, to simply say we have to expect a certain amount of, in entrepreneurship is more like batting averages, than it is school grades, So, we have to expect a certain amount of, mission drift or degradation. When this is the downside of autonomy, right? This is the downside of empowerment. If you really empower people, you give up control. And when you give up control, certain things are going to happen. I still think the net gain is so much greater by seeing real disciples being made in that free space, in that liberated space. Like, people have to really rely on God. They have to really internalize Scripture. Which doesn't happen in high control environments. It just doesn't. I mean, we looked at that study with Willow all those years ago, those high control environments where every little aspect of discipleship is highly programmed and excellent. That was the buzzword, wasn't it, in the 80s and 90s, excellence. We wanted excellence. Well, we got excellence, but we didn't get disciples. So at the end of that, and they're admitting this, right? Like, we didn't really make disciples, because the only way to make disciples is to put them, sort of drop them out of the boat and just see what little squirt can do, swimming solo, and that means we're going to have a loss rate, we're going to have mission drift, we're going to have stuff like that. It's interesting. I was reading just yesterday, I'm reading Mark 7, and that bit in there, he's sort of, again, he's dealing with the Pharisees, and he says something like, he quotes Isaiah and says, their lips talk about me, but their hearts are far from me.
Mm.
And then he has this amazing little metaphor that just kind of slips by you. I think it's in verse 8 where he says, you have let go of the commands of God and you're holding on to human tradition, right? So every time we start something, so we hear a command of God, make disciples, do justice, care for the poor. And so that command comes to us and like, that's the thing we're grabbing. That's the thing we're holding on to. And then we make something, we try to think, how do I do that? And we create something, right? And that thing which we've created is good. It's inspired by God. It has grace. Maybe it bears fruit for a while, but it becomes a threat in a sense to the original command because now it's precious to us and it works. And maybe we have a little bit of reputation on it and maybe, I don't know. And so like he's saying is it's almost like you have one hand on the command and you have one hand on this thing which you've created, this human tradition which you've created. And he's saying like you let go of this and you're holding with two hands this. And when you do that, it's like a mooring is lost. Like you were actually holding on to shore or to the dock or whatever. And once you let go of that original command, that original intent, and you put both hands on this human thing which you've created, you're going to drift. You're going to drift. Right. And I've seen that. So to the person asking the question, I've seen that over and over and over again, which is, I would argue, why we really need networks, robust, strong networks, where there's a kind of healthy peer pressure to not let go of God, to not let go of the command of God, of Jesus himself. I just was reading Athanasius, saying like what Jesus wants is what God is saying is to make Jesus the center of all of our senses. He wants to be like the thing that we look for, that we hear, that we taste, that we touch. All of our sensual life is really about searching for him, the heart for him. And when we let go of that and care more about our tools or more about our church or more about our program or more about our curriculum or more about our brand or whatever, exactly what has happened to that group will happen to us. And it is happening to us, and it has happened to us on big levels. You know what I mean? So it's sad. I think the only way around it is fellowship. Like, Peyton, we're friends. If I ever drift away from Jesus, you have permission from me to come talk to me, to get on a plane and get a couple other guys that know me, and to come knock on my door and just be like, dude, we love you. Where is Jesus in the thing you're doing? You covenanted before God and everybody else that this would be the thing. And I want that. I know you would want that. And the truth is, when that's strong enough, we're less likely to do it. And when the underground is at its strongest point, we saw very little of that drift. But on lower points, and our stories, like any other story, there's sort of ebbs and flows. At lower points, yes, people will drift, but it's because of Jesus.
Wow. Well, man, look, I know we're out of time, but I can't thank you enough for giving your time. Is there anywhere, I mean, obviously the Underground website, do you want to kind of connect, if you guys want to get in touch with Brian, anywhere that they can go to get in touch with you or connect? Or
I mean, you can email me, I suppose, if you want to chat or connect or something. Just Brian at right now I'm Brian at bravefuture.org. So that's always, you can get me. But yeah, we have really great, you mentioned Jeremy earlier. Jeremy's still coaching people all over the country, and he's kind of a star at that. He really is good at coming alongside people. So if you are looking to just get some input, and you're intrigued by the Underground's approach or whatever, he really is perfect for that. So happy.
And he's a U2 fan, which is important. So
fan is an understatement of what he is. You know what? When he came to Dublin, we had to go by Bono's house.
Of course,
sit outside in the dark like weirdos.
Did he make an appearance?
He didn't. I mean, I'm like, are we going to wait here all night because he's not coming out?
This is no joke. This is no joke. When I went to Wales, first time, I knocked on Mike Peters from The Alarm. I knocked on his door and had tea in his kitchen.
You're kidding.
I did.
See, sometimes you just got to ask, man. You have not because you ask not.
I was 19. I didn't know any better. Now I look back and I'm horrified, but I always get into his concerts free and get backstage passes. So,
Amazing.
It did work something out. All right, brother. Well, hey, thank you so much, guys. Definitely check that out, Brian at bravefeatures.org. And I just thought I had that email like I was special, but whatever. But hey, hey, always a pleasure. And guys, if you want this recording, go to ministryninja.org and we will send this out. So thanks, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
Thanks all for joining. Bye.